All right, guys, so this is the review sheet for Unit 6. Again, as usual, this will be broken up into a few different videos. So here we go. Question 1. Before World War II and after World War I, what was the policy that guided U.S. foreign relations? So after World War I, the U.S. returned to their previous foreign policy of neutrality and isolationism. After the horrors of World War I, getting involved with things like trench warfare and poison gas, the U.S. wanted to go back to being neutral and isolationist. So number 2 refers to a few efforts to be neutral and isolationist. One was the Washington Naval Conference. This was kind of an international gathering from a bunch of different countries, and their goal was to limit the size of these countries' navies, but again, with the ultimate purpose of avoiding another war. The Kellogg-Briand Pact was similar. This was an agreement where countries basically agreed to not go to war. They promised to not use war as an instrument of foreign policy and to not fight each other, but here's the problem. There's really no way to enforce this. If one country breaks the promise and goes to war, the only way to stop them is to also go to war. So the Kellogg-Briand Pact did prove to be ineffective. Number 3, when Hitler invaded the Sudetenland, he was appeased at the Munich Conference. What is meant by that? So that term appeasement basically means to give in to someone's demands with the hope that they don't demand anything more. What happened was Hitler invaded part of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland, and when he met with some leaders of other countries, including Great Britain, Hitler basically promised that he wouldn't take any more if he was allowed to keep what he had already taken. Now, Hitler never intended to keep this promise, but the Allies appeased him. They said that, look, you can keep this part of Czechoslovakia that you took already as long as you don't take any more territory. This kind of sent the message to Hitler that if he invaded more territory and continued to act aggressively, that no other Allied nations would step in to stop him. Number 4, what happened in Europe that led to the outbreak of war in 1939? So in September of 1939, Germany launched an invasion of Poland. Soon after that, France and Great Britain declared war on Germany, and World War II had begun. But initially, at the beginning, the United States remained neutral. Our stance was to not get involved in the conflict, not take sides, continue to be isolationist, continue to be neutral. Eventually, though, we see the U.S. start to move away from that policy. As the war continued, as Nazi Germany continued to invade more and more parts of Europe, and as Great Britain started to get attacked and started to get threatened, we did slowly start to get involved in the war. The first way was the policy of cash and carry. This is where we sold war material, especially ships and guns and ammunition, things like that, to the British. But the deal was they had to pay up front and they had to come get them. We weren't going to deliver them to the British. As the war continues, though, we start to get involved even more and more with the Lend-Lease Act. Under the Lend-Lease Act, the U.S. basically would just give or even sell pretty significant amounts of military supplies to the British with no expectation of getting it back or even getting paid for it. Eventually, though, the U.S. does get involved. Number 6 asks what the immediate cause of the U.S. entry into war was, and that was the surprise attack by the Japanese on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7th, 1941. Shortly after that, we declare war on Japan. Germany declares war on the United States, and we were fully involved in World War II. Number 7, during World War II, the U.S. became the arsenal of democracy. What was meant by that? So an arsenal means a place where weapons are produced and stored. The United States was producing significant amounts of military supplies. Planes, tanks, bombs, guns, ships, things like that. We produced more than any other nation, and we were providing them to democratic nations, places like Great Britain that were our allies in the war. Question 8 talks about the home front. How was each group affected during the war? Women had many more opportunities to work in jobs that were traditionally held by men, like working in wartime production factories. We get that kind of image of Rosie the Riveter from this time period. African Americans also had more opportunities for manufacturing jobs, especially in northern cities. The Great Migration continued, but Black citizens still faced discrimination, even though they were helping to kind of contribute to the war effort. Consumers, remember, consumers means buyers. Consumer goods were limited because a lot of the production was focused on military goods, and consumers couldn't really get certain goods. Goods that were available were rationed, meaning consumers can only buy certain amounts, although many of them did buy products in the black market. Finally, the Japanese. Any Japanese Americans living on the West Coast were sent to internment camps under Executive Order 9066. We'll pause here and pick back up with number 9.